Hello, and welcome to Wildcat Science. This is human biology, and this is the cardiovascular. Welcome to Wildcat Science with Mrs. Haugo. This is human biology, chapter 16 and 17, the lymphatic system and the immune system. So, lymphatic and immune systems. With the lymphatic system, it acts like a sewage system. Its main functions are to clean, filter, and then return fluids. The components of the lymphatic system are spread throughout the body. So some examples are lymph, which is the fluid, lymphatic vessels, and lymphoid tissues, like your lymph nodes, spleen, thymus, and tonsils. So the functions of the lymphatic system are to keep fluid balance in your body, that always important homeostasis. So they return fluid from the tissues to the bloodstream, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also, they're important for protection. The lymphatic system works with the immune system, and that is why we're putting the two chapters together in one unit. So the lymphoid tissues throughout the body do surveillance and filter out pathogens. And in particular, lymphocytes, which are a type of white blood cell, and as we remember, white blood cells are leukocytes, so this is a type of leukocyte, live in the lymphatic system where they locate, attack, and then destroy pathogens. Okay, and a third function we're going to talk about is actually fat absorption. So there are fats that you have digested. So all the fats that you have digested are too big to be absorbed by blood capillaries in the digestive system. So what does your body do? Special lymphatic vessels called lacteals in the small intestines absorb fat molecules, and then the fat molecules get into the lymph, which is then brought back to the blood and is brought around to your tissues. So let's take a look at the lymphatic system. As you can see with all these green lines, there are lymphatic vessels, and then what their dots are lymph nodes all throughout the body, and you do have some concentration of lymph nodes in certain areas. So let's talk about lymphatic circulation. As the blood circulates through capillaries in body tissues, fluid diffuses out of the blood capillaries and into body tissue. Most of the fluid diffuses from the body tissues back into the blood capillaries, but not all of it. So what do we do with the rest of it? Extra fluid must be returned to blood, or the big problems will result, like edema. So that extra fluid is picked up by the lymphatic capillaries. So lymphatic capillaries are similar to your regular blood capillaries, but different. So what is the same, what is different? Lymphatic capillaries are similar to blood capillaries, except they start out of nowhere in the body tissues, which is called arising blindly. Blood capillaries always connect between two blood vessels, between the arterioles and the venules, whereas lymphatic capillaries just start in the tissues and don't connect anything. Lymphatic capillaries have a thin layer of overlapping cells, so fluid flows in but not out. And there is a great picture of that on page 365 in your book. Also, the fluid in lymphatic capillaries is called lymph, and it is very similar to blood plasma. And lymphatic capillaries drain into small lymphatic vessels, which drain into large lymphatic vessels. So just like lymphatic capillaries dump into lymphatic vessels, like we know that blood capillaries dump into blood vessels. So we'll take a look at that picture in a second. So lymphatic vessels resemble veins in structure. They are much more like veins than they are like arteries. They have thin walls, just like veins do, because both the lymph and the blood in veins is at low pressure. Also, they have valves, so the lymph only moves in one direction, just like veins have valves, so that the blood doesn't go backwards. So in this picture you can see the green are the lymphatic vessels, and they are arising blindly. The lymphatic capillaries are arising blindly in the tissue, and the fluid only goes one way. You can see there are these little flaps in the lymphatic capillaries that lets fluid in, but it would not let fluid out. So let's take a look at the lymphatic vessels. As you can see, here are the blood vessels, the capillaries, and then there are the lymphatic vessels, and there's these little valves, and then the lymph goes through the lymph nodes on its way back up and eventually will dump into veins right by the heart, and it'll become part of the blood and get pumped around. So lymphatic vessels carry lymph through lymph nodes like this. The lymph picked up bacteria and viruses as well as proteins, electrolytes, and fluid. Lymph nodes destroy most pathogens. Okay, looking at more at some lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels make a one-way circuit to the heart. They return all fluid and plasma proteins to the blood. Lymph either goes into the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct. And looking at our picture, the thoracic duct, a lot of the lymph would collect and then dump into here, which is your subclavian vein, and then which would go into your superior vena cava. And then the right lymphatic duct is up here, and that would also dump into your jugular vein, which would go into the superior vena cava. So these ducts drain into the veins by the heart. So the lymph is returned to the blood and becomes blood plasma. Okay, so let's talk about the lymphoid organs in your body. Here's a picture showing where they are. They include the lymph nodes, which we're going to talk more about, the spleen, which is located over here, the thymus, which is located by your sternum, and your tonsils, which are in the pharynx or the throat. Okay, so you should have all heard about lymph nodes. These are bean-shaped organs along the path of lymphatic vessels, and they are all quite small. They're about the size of a pin head to at most 1 inch in size. So many are found near the cervical, your neck region, the armpit or axillary, and then the inguinal regions. You have concentrations of those in those regions. And lymph nodes will all have a cortex in outer and a medulla inner regions. So afferent lymphatic vessels bring lymph in, and we already know this word afferent from our afferent nerves in the nervous system. The lymph nodes are designed to filter the lymph as it travels through. The lymph percolates through what's called lymph sinuses. Okay, so what is going on when all that lymph is percolating through the lymph nodes? The lymphocyte and macrophages, which are type of leukocytes, type of white blood cells, identify and destroy the pathogens there. And the efferent lymphatic vessels will then carry the lymph out and on its way. As we can see in this picture, you have afferent, with an A, lymphatic vessels coming in. The lymph is going to percolate within the lymph node, and all of those leukocytes will be there to attack and kill pathogens, and then it will go on its way. All right, let's look at some pictures. So let's look at the leukocytes that are found in lymph nodes. As you can see here, all the lymph vessels and the little round dots are the lymph nodes, and here's one that is blown up for us to see, and it will have a B lymphocyte, which is a type of leukocyte, a natural killer cell, which is another type of leukocyte, and a T lymphocyte. Those are all living in your lymph nodes, taking care of you as we speak. Also looking at your lymph nodes, let's look at this picture again. You can see there's concentration of them in the cervical neck region, armpit axillary region, inguinal groin region, and then this has the thoracic duct where the vessels drain, and the right lymphatic duct where more of the vessels drain back into the vena cava and then into the blood supply. Okay, let's look at another picture. It's a lymphangiogram, which is a picture where you can see lymph nodes in. So you can see the pelvis. So here is the pelvis and the pubic symphysis, and then all of these little cottony looking things are lymph nodes. Okay, another of your lymphoid organ is your spleen. So maybe some of you know where your spleen is. It is by the stomach, underneath the diaphragm, on your left side. So if you look here, there's the pancreas, the stomach would be above that, there's the kidney, and then the spleen is tucked right there. So what about the spleen? It is located in the left hypochondriac region of your abdomen, if you can remember your terms from chapter 1, near your diaphragm and stomach. It is a 4 to 6 inch soft purple organ, and the functions of the spleen are lymphocytes and phagocytes, which are types of leukocytes, white blood cells, in the spleen will identify and destroy pathogens. It also has several functions that are not actually lymphatic system functions. It will filter and recycle old worn-out erythrocytes or red blood cells, and it stores blood cells in case of emergency. Okay, splenectomy. What would a splenectomy be using your medical terminology? The spleen is usually protected by the rib cage, but in case of injury or disease, if it is ruptured, a person can live without one, so you can take your spleen out. If you don't need to, it's better to keep it in because it does do some good with filtering out pathogens. So if you look here, there is some red pulp and white pulp, and there are lots of blood vessels in there, and that is your spleen. Another lymphoid organ is the thymus. As you can see, it is a flat tissue, massive tissue, located posterior to the sternum and anterior to the heart, and certain lymphocytes, T cells, must mature in the thymus. It is very important to the immune system of a fetus, infants, and pre-adolescent children, and it does become less important for adults. The last lymphoid organ I'm going to talk about are the tonsils. They are masses of lymphoid tissue in the pharynx, which is the throat. Tonsils remove contaminants from materials that are swallowed or inhaled. They have deep grooves which house lymphocytes, which we know are a type of leukocyte, white blood cell, and those lymphocytes will attack pathogens. You actually have 3 sets of tonsils. Your palatine tonsils, which is the back of the soft palate, and that's what we think of as tonsils. Besides those traditional tonsils, you also have your pharyngeal tonsils, which are located on the posterior wall of the upper pharynx, and they are often called adenoids. And then you also have lingual tonsils. So your palatine tonsils are here, your pharyngeal tonsils are up here, and the lingual tonsils are right there, and they are posterior to the tongue. And as I said, all of these sets of tonsils are masses of lymphoid tissue that will attack pathogens that come into what you breathe or swallow. So next up, in our next video, we're going to talk about what can go wrong with the lymphatic system.